movie proves quite the quandary to review. We are talking Spirit of Fear, directed, written and produced by Alex Davidson. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want? Is it about the destination or is it about the journey? And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that in a little bit. This is a somewhat unique film in some ways, but it is familiar in some other ways. So it focuses on this guy called Chris, and he kind of wakes up on a bed without seemingly no memory of who he is, how he's got there, what's actually gone on. And he appears to be in this kind of quite well kept house. And there's little clues, little post-it notes all around in seemingly his own handwriting, instructing him to do things like don't stay in the bathroom too long, don't go outside, don't go into the basement. And he doesn't quite know what's kind of going on and sort of ultimately has to try and figure out. The movie plays a little bit like a escape room, with this character finding, a clue that leads him to the next clue ultimately, and so on and so forth. There's virtually no dialogue in this movie, or very little dialogue. There's maybe like 15 lines of dialogue in the whole film, and it's essentially more or less one actor on screen for kind of like 90% of the film. So what do we think? What can I say that works here? This is going to be a spoiler-free review, and in some ways I wish I could go into spoilers, because I'd like to go into a little bit about the things I liked and the things I didn't. But in a spoiler-free way, I will say this movie ends in an absolutely fantastic way. I'll be honest with you, this movie was hard for me to sit through because I found it quite dull, and I'll come on to why that is in a minute. But damn, that ending was strong. And I found it fascinating on a number of levels, and so much so that I will say, looking back at the film as a whole, it actually made me appreciate the whole film. And then up until that point, I was kind of ultimately thinking it was a little dull. But yeah, such a strong ending. It kind of makes sense. It's very much has some familiar elements, but kind of it's in a way you haven't really seen it before. So yeah, a very strong ending. And I've got to say as well, I think the actual opening is pretty strong. We have this kind of mystery. What's happened to this guy? Who is he? How's he got there? And that initial kind of like 10 minutes where we're kind of finding out what is kind of going on, I felt was pretty strong. There are some creepy moments in the movie. There is a supernatural element to this movie, and that there are some sequences I feel were done to a kind of a reasonably kind of a creepy kind of level. I would say it was they came across as a little bit kind of like unnerving at times. There's not loads, to be honest with you, but there are a couple of sequences where I did feel it was a little bit kind of unnerving at times. And if you like things like escape rooms, obviously there's lots of kind of mystery and clues here leading you to the next thing and the next thing, then you may get a kick out of the movie, maybe more than some. What doesn't work? Okay, this movie, I have to be honest with you, I found incredibly boring. You have one character on screen who doesn't really talk, basically doing these kind of like little tasks throughout the film that will lead him on to another task ultimately. And that is it. That is the majority of the film. Like I've said, without spoiling it, I will say it ends well. It does make sense. But I have to be honest with you, I genuinely thought about turning this film off. Because it was just dull. It doesn't help that there is nearly no dialogue in this film. I get what they were, when you see the film as a whole and you understand the context of it, it makes sense. But until you get there, it is dull. It is dull. And, it's kind of very bland visually in a lot of ways as well. You know, we have this kind of like this house with kind of magnolia paint, and it's all kind of like not particularly kind of visually interesting. And we get a couple of scenes where it gets a little spooky, as I mentioned, but the vast majority of it is quite kind of like mundane to look at. When I first started I like the initial kind of 10 minutes, as I've mentioned, but even then I had some problems. I mean, we have this guy who kind of wakes up and he sees these kind of first couple of notes to kind of like say, don't go out, you know, don't go out. I'm thinking, why are you just go along with it? Why is he just ultimately doesn't even question it? Surely if that was you were in a position like that, you would assume you've been drugged or something, and you might assume that there's some type of prank with kind of cameras kind of going round, and that's not addressed at all. He just kind of absolutely kind of goes on with that without ever really kind of questioning why he's there, if that makes sense. It just kind of goes along with the kind of the narrative that these kind of clues and stuff have set out. But I just think that, you know, some type of weird mystery wouldn't be my first kind of reaction. I'd think, damn, have I been drugged? Or is this some type of prank? And again, you'd be, you know, calling out, hey, can anyone hear me? Blah, blah, blah. None of that. And I thought that was kind of, you know, it's just a typical kind of movie logic, if that makes sense. Now, when you see the film at whole, it might kind of think, oh, you know, there may be reasons for that. But I've got to be honest with you, I don't know if people will make it to the end of this film, because it is boring. It is boring. You know, like I said, there's a couple of, he needed to have dialogue in it, even if he's talking to himself or he's talking to an inanimate object and kind of like trying to kind of get his thoughts out and stuff like that. It is dull. You're literally just watching a guy silently walking around a house doing somewhat kind of mundane tasks. And when we do get something a little more fantastic, you think, oh, what the hell is going on? The movie has given you no context about what you actually are watching until right at the very end. Now, when you put this film as a whole, you know, clever. I can see why. I can see what they've done, and they wanted to have this kind of reveal at the end that it kind of like explains a lot of what you've been watching and why it hasn't made sense and things like that. And I understand that logic, but it's going to be the case if people get to the end, because I think many won't, and that is going to be the real problem. But even with the clever ending, I feel there was ways to make this movie more interesting, kind of as a kind of a watch all the way through. And this is what I mean: is it the journey or is it the kind of the destination? Because I think the destination was strong, but the journey to get there, damn, that's like a 10-hour flight with no entertainment. You know, that was some long ass kind of like, you know, bland looking kind of movie I was watching. I mean, it's not a long runtime, thank goodness. But even so, I was struggling to kind of watch this one. So it becomes a real difficult film to review, because I can clearly see why they have chosen to do this and why they have chosen to keep you in the dark and kind of have this kind of like just a little bit of weirdness kind of going on. Because it does make sense when you watch the film as a whole. And the film is, as I say, it's clever even. It's a clever movie. But I think, you know, as a filmmaker and people involved in the film, they think, yes, this is a great idea. Yeah. But when you're watching it cold, watching it as a, you know, a person not kind of related to the film, it's just a very difficult film to be able to sit for the whole way through without kind of like thinking, oh man, I just want it to end. So, what to score this? You know, the ending does bring a few points up, because this was looking at like 2 or 3 out of 10 for me. I'm going to give it a 5, because I do feel it's such a strong ending. And even though I can't at the beginning, there's a couple of creepy moments, but damn, it is a boring film other than that. So, 5 out of 10. And I know that review's a little vague, but I don't want to spoil the best part of the film for you. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.